one of the biggest problems we have in the profession of Chinese medicine, like it is the biggest problem that we have, in my opinion. There's a bunch of problems, but here's our biggest one: is people fail to understand properly something from Business 101 30 years ago called.
Hi, and welcome to the Damn Good Podcast, a place for meditative rants on the future of medicine. I'm Jeremy Cornish, your host, and we're doing a limited series of interviews with leaders in the field. And today's guest, Mark Brinson, fits the bill. He's been at it for over 3 decades. He's still learning, he's still growing, he's still dealing with imposter syndrome as he steps into the next phase of development, and he's going really, really big on some very cool stuff. Some of you may be familiar with Mark from Evil Bone Water, which is his artisanal version of Zhengu Shui. He went super high quality with this. It's been changing the game for a lot of clinics, and he's doing things to push the envelope and become a leader to pave the way for other people in the field, especially if you're an herbalist or you want to make products, or if you're just working on growing your practice. You're going to find a lot of gems in this conversation. So let's get to it. We spoke a little bit before about scaling up and helping veterans and kind of being aligned to this next stage of things. So, I mean, we may as well just start with that because I think it's probably some of the most exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. My business was doing, or the business was doing really, really well, for the past few years. I'm very happy with it. We're serving a lot of people. And once it's a clinic that carries it, they normally not only keep buying, but buy more often. So we've been able to keep up with growth. The most I think we've ever gotten ahead is maybe 2 to 4 weeks, just trying to keep up. So we're at that point where our current systems are a little bit maxed, and we looked at a lot of different things. And then the VA opportunity came up. Our end goal is to be able to not only be used in the VA, which I'm pretty sure we can in all the whole health departments. There's 171 VAs nationally that a lot of them have now these whole health departments that are chiropractic, physical therapy, acupuncturist, several other things like enrichment type things for VAs. It's a new incentive on their part, so we can be used there. But what we're really looking for is to be prescribed and carried in the pharmacy. So in order to do that, we started looking at some of the numbers and what they could possibly be, even just for the addition of whole health. And the government works on a budget, and the budget's, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. So we're like, we have to be really ready before we pump the gas on this, because quite honestly, we've never pumped the gas on the business. It's been make sure we keep up and make sure we serve everybody properly with no corners cut. And to do that, you got to do things right. So we've grown organically that way. So with this, this will be the first time that I've really publicly talked about it. Within about 2 weeks, we're going to be closing on just a wonderful 4,000 square foot warehouse that is, man, I feel I don't have imposter syndrome necessarily, but everything we looked at for the past year and a half would have been a work in progress for years while we were working in it. This one has 4 ACs. It has 15-foot drop ceilings that have insulation. It's got 3-phase electric that's beautiful throughout the whole place, compression throughout the whole thing. So basically what we're doing is we're going to a facility where it will pay to do all the infrastructure necessary, the plumbing, the water filtration, everything that needs to be done for, say, a brewery or a distillery. And we have a friend locally that used to have a business where they made stuff like that, that is doing us a huge favor with some of their old stuff they never sold, making it new again. And we will be working with 260-gallon vats in tandem that are swirling the decoction around. I figured out a way to actually make it at volume and make it better. I'll still be making it all myself, but I think that this way of making it is going to be superior to any decoction that's previously been made, because basically you'll have things circulating continually while the decoction is going on. And this is something new with my son joining the business. Maybe 6 months to a year ago, after he got out of the Air Force. He's been out of the Air Force for a few years, but he may even take on the distilling portion of it. So, there's all this pressure to use denatured alcohol or to use commercial grade ethanol, which just is not the same. I just have my own standard with it, but I go back to, you put it on your skin, and you've got Everclear, grain alcohol that you can drink, and then you've got commercial ethanol on your skin, and they don't feel the same. One dries out immediately. So in this quest to be able to do that without paying the exorbitant taxes and whatnot, it's kind of led us to this point where we could end up having a distillery attached in the next 6 months. He may end up having his own distillery at some point where we are his first and biggest client. But it's going to be good. So I've been, instead of my normal toxic positivity self over the past couple of months, I've been a little bit not so much online, and it's mostly because the process with the SBA and all of this stuff is just insane. On a good note, however, we are back 25 years, business and personal. We have every I punched, we have every T crossed, we have everything that you can imagine taken care of, which is leading us possibly in a couple different directions for the VA. Now, I will never sell to anybody but acupuncture physicians wholesale. Never sell to the public because that's you guys' domain. And the only other population that I would actually provide for is the VA, is the veterans, and that's a whole separate deal. Most of them are underserved in a lot of different ways. The ones going to the actual VAs. So anyway, exciting stuff. If all goes well, within a couple weeks, we'll be closing, and there will be a month of kind of sigh, but also some pretty exciting like changes that I hope to share with everybody. One of my things with this business from the very beginning, which most people can probably see if they followed anything online, is I'm trying to pave the way for other people. I'm trying to help make sure that if you guys want to do this, and we're in this golden age of Chinese medicine making and formulas, where if you're on it, we are going to be able to help so many people and really make a really good money with it. And that's, I think that should always be secondary, because if you're worried about helping more people and as best as you can, the money's going to be there. That's all you have to work with. But I hope to help people prevent them from doing the mistakes that I did along the way, and maybe make a couple things easier for them if they see how I'm doing things, and get a little encouragement from them. It's all doable.
So are you looking at this as a potential incubator space for other liniment makers? Is that what you're saying in terms of speeding things?
We're going to end up having a test kitchen area. We're going to end up having a lab area. And it could be, we're definitely going to have a large library. People are selling off their books like crazy, and we're going to be there to scoop them up. My assistant and manager at the warehouse, or the headquarters, she has librarian experience, and really her one of her uncles was a librarian for 20 years. So we're going to try to cultivate a space that could be for learning too, and we'll have to see where that goes. Ultimately, I started, well, not started, but I used to be predominantly an educator, in the profession, and well, for other professions, not as much acupuncturist. And I love helping people develop their knowledge, but also, I'd love to have a space where we've got a nice little pharmacy and a test kitchen, where if somebody wants to figure out something, we can help them figure it out. We've done that with many companies along the way. That, if somebody contacts me and they're like, I can't figure out which formula to make. I don't know what to put in it, and I don't know who to sell it to. It's probably not the right time to ask me the question. But if you're like, I got this thing that's just
Yeah.
not quite doing what it's supposed to do, do you have a suggestion or two? I've got suggestions all day long, and we've definitely helped some people bridge that gap just a few times. So yeah, yeah, that's it. It'll be neat, and some of this is just stuff that I've always wanted to do. You know what I mean? But now I have a little bit more of a budget to do it.
Yeah, this is fantastic. There's so many things you kind of made me think about when you're sharing that. One of them is that one of my kind of tests or heuristics, if I'm thinking about any kind of growth or expansion or any other big, bold moves, I kind of figured this out back in the old days when I was looking to buy a practice,
Mhm.
was borrow the money for it. Whether you need the money or not, act like you do and go to a bank, because they'll be tighter than a duck's ass with looking at everything, and they'll have the most pessimistic estimates of everything. They're like, well, how much do you think you're going to make? And you tell them, and they're like, we're going to cut that by a third. And all these things, it's so cynical. But if you can pass that to where they would stamp you then you know you've got probably a pretty sure bet. Whether you need the money or not, it's like having a second set of eyes on a business venture. So that being said, if you're going through the SBA and they're kind of going to be backing you or whatever, if they are willing to kind of hit the gas with you and partner with you in that respect, it's most likely that you shouldn't be too worried.
Yeah, that's exactly what was going to happen. And it turns out that, well, now all the SBA searches are done and the bank searches are done by AI, believe it or not. So they find things from every angle that you could possibly figure. And there's something from 2003 that was an erroneous tax lien. Somehow they thought that in 2003, when I'm a 3-year newly minted physician, that I made enough money to pay $42,000 on something. I don't know how I made that much money, and neither did they. So it was one of those things that was dropped off, after however many years. So it doesn't exist in the eyes of the IRS. Yet it still exists in that county record as old record. So that's exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to give us an economic development loan, which is a separate part of the SBA, and it was going to be really, really easy, except for that one thing. And to say that the IRS moves at the pace of a snail is putting it more than mildly. I think I called their advocacy line and was trying to leave a message, and I was directed that it could take at least 2 to 3 weeks for the message to be like received. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. So what we ended up doing with this is we ended up dropping the SBA, and we were questionable about the secondary loan because, believe it or not, this is a business we've never used any of our own money for. This is save the initial research and development that I did on the formula. This is all built on acupuncture physicians. You guys all built this stuff. I mean,
Yep,
you guys have
bootstrapped.
funded me the whole way on pre-sales. But anyway, so we ended up going a different route. That will be cleared within a couple months, and so will be gold. But we were starting to get, one of the things, like you say, that even if it's a modest loan, if it's something that skips you clearly forward 2 or 3 years, it's probably really helpful. So I don't know that we'll be having that this time, and we don't need it. It just would have been kind of nice. But anyway, and I will
Yeah.
mention this about the SBA process. Uh, it will get you right with everything from your past, which honestly, if you really have a business that you want to grow, isn't the worst thing in the world to do. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and also what you mentioned about using different types of alcohol, right? Commercial alcohol versus something that you make. I really like this heuristic of if you aren't prepared to eat it, don't put it on your skin.
Well, and so not everybody's going to agree with me, and I totally get their point, right? That isopropyl is okay because we use that on other things. Rubbing alcohol, that's what they used to call it, right? That commercial ethanol is okay, and I do think that they're okay, right? But they also even used to say, and some still do, that in the topical realm, you just use whatever leftover herbs you have because you're soaking them. It's a much longer extraction. You're going to get it all out of there anyway. For my particular product, I do not believe in. I don't even use the dregs in future batches. The dregs actually go to what I call fresh alcohol and soak in that for a month to be used in new batches as fresh alcohol. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So it's still getting used. It's still getting extracted. Um, so yeah, so when is good enough good enough? And I understand completely with other companies why they'll use denatured or why they'll use the other ones because the cost it really is a fraction of the cost. Um, and there are certain blocks with the government that make it quite difficult to use alcohol in a product that doesn't have additives to it or isn't denatured. That's what we're running into. That's leading us to potentially producing our own. Um, anyway, it's the further that you go up the chain with things, looking into FDA, looking for GMP, looking for anything government. If I wanted to add a chemical or a drug to my product, I could get I could save tens of thousands of dollars a year. I could get approved instantly for a lot of things. Um, I'm not going to do it, but I got to admit to you, it's not easy. It's
Yeah.
just it's geared towards using drugs, like the whole system is. So,
Yeah, I mean that's I've got my own kind of dark thoughts about that stuff and why the system's set up to optimize what it's set up to optimize. And it does take a lot to kind of just stand strong and hold your center with
Yeah.
these things, right? Because if you've got this is the classic kind of thing that happens with all these little mom and pop food, uh, baby products,
Mhm.
skincare, whatever it is. They start out with this the whole thing like, we got sick of all this shit on the market. We wanted to make it right, make it out of good natural ingredients. They do it. They get big. They get bought.
Yeah, because what there is, just for other people that are making, so there's a really good spot where you can make good money and you can be very true to all of your vision and your natural and all of that. And then there's a jump, which we're looking at right now, that if we want to jump to being legal in the eyes of the FDA and the GMP. Not legal, but you know what I mean? Like we want to comply with regulation. So all of this that we've done, we have to spend about this much time where we don't make anything. You really do. And then when we go to the other thing. So what happens at that point, it's big companies know that that point exists. And normally when it hits, some people come calling with a check and say, "Do you want to see your product do whatever you want to? You'll be able to stay on as on the board of directors. You'll be able to be responsible in all the decisions." And then within a year, bye, you get your severance, and they kick you out, and then your product is for selling every Walmart ever, and it's not your product anymore. It's not your quality because then they go and they put in the isopropyl, or then they start using B or C grade herbs instead of imperial grade. Then they
Yep.
cut all the corners, the bean counters, and I want to encourage like other makers and whatnot. When you look as an herbalist at the cost of high quality herbs, a lot of us like are, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. Take a step back and put it into perspective. So, say maybe my natural camphor instead of $20 a kilo is like $70 a kilo. That's $70 for a kilo of freaking super high quality herbs. That is literally like 3 or 4 bottles of aspirin from CVS. It's really nothing. And we've been so conditioned to seeing our herbs so cheap. I unfortunately think that those days are kind of gone. All the prices are increasing, but still, it's the best. I mean, it is the best deal on the block as far as it goes. So, but even if you're making something where you don't think that you can afford those individual components at the highest quality you can get, choose one. Choose one of your favorite herbs in there and just get that high quality, and it'll change your stuff like incredibly. So,
That's really smart advice. Yeah, kind of going with an 80-20. Like what's the herb
yeah,
that's going to do the 80% in here and just go hard on that one.
yeah. What's your heavy lifter? So whatever your heavy lifter is or heavy lifters, take a couple of those and just get some the best quality that you can afford to get. I'll give you an example. So we have some rare and hard to find herbs and things like that. We're all botanical biohacking, so it's all imperial grade, like the whole way. There's only one thing that it's not. All of our stuff is, so it doesn't matter as much. But our senchi, our tenchi, we can't do imperial grade because instead of being like however many hundreds of dollars a kilo, $600-700 a kilo, it would be like $6,000 a kilo. So on stuff like that, that's the only one that I'm like, send us the quality that you would feel comfortable with your grandmother using. Simple as that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in the context of the rest of it, that is great, and it's better than any that's used commercially. Instead of the tiny little pieces, we've got
Yeah.
big old nuggets that have been in the ground a whole lot longer, and I'm happy with it. But yeah, just there's been several makers where I've been like, look, just choose one or just choose two and use this quality, and we even had one recently where he used most, except for a couple of the higher quality stuff of the botanical biohacking stuff, and he just amazed because the color came out different, like the texture came out different, the whole thing. It came out almost as a whole different thing, and it just looked amazing. Anyway, that's
It's really wild because there is a certain life to these things. And when it's hard to articulate it, right? I guess it's like wine drinkers when they talk about, like, oh, the wine has good legs and all this stuff. You kind of start to notice, but there is a vibrancy to what you would consider inert products, right? Like a tincture or a
Mhm.
liniment or something like that. Like it's just a thing. But there's different, especially with wet things. Like tinctures can have a certain rolling quality, or you can kind of see that the drops of them even seem like heavy and full, versus
Mhm.
just like a thin. It's a very interesting thing. And where does that
So,
come from,
so
right?
with that, curiously, I know why that is now. Because when me and my son took our distilling classes, that's a very distinct thing that can happen with distilling. If you distill something in the proper way that's really good, so say it's a good quality alcohol, the alcohol almost rolls on your tongue and has like almost a
Yeah,
moistening quality without it. Yeah, so it's determined by the things that you don't think make any difference, you know? So yeah, intriguing, right?
that is fascinating. So, are you picturing this 4,000 square foot industrial space? Are you going to put some bunk beds in there and turn it into like a TCM hostel where people can come and crash and
You
get into the
know,
test kitchen?
after we get it fully rolling, we'll have our all of our fun stuff in there. We'll have our little employee gym that we like to have, but
Oh,
an
nice.
area for filming. I have a little treatment area that's for filming, but not a clinic or anything like that. Might even have a little archery range out the back. But anyway, uh, yeah, I don't know if you know. Are you familiar with Bob Lendy?
No.
So Bob Lendy has acupuncture and herbals here in St. Pete. He graduated a class ahead of me, and I consider myself most of the time a master herbalist unless Bob's around. He's like toured the rainforest with camera crews following me. He's got all of his every square foot of everything in his yard, and just Bob can walk you through downtown St. Pete, and every 2 seconds find a medicinal growing in the cracks of whatever it is. And he actually is the one that helped me find this particular building. But yeah, like for things like that, and maybe other things in the future, I'd love for people to come in and it be like a little bit of learning space on occasion. Sit in and have a herb class. Sit in and have a little mini seminar or something. I I used to, and I'll never forget one of my favorite things to do when I was in school for Chinese medicine. We had a fantastic facility that was here in St. Pete, and they had a true herbal pharmacy with the big jars. These were all 18 double doctors from China that were just amazing in their craft and demanded. I didn't realize that we were getting that super high quality because they were getting it from their friends sent over. I didn't realize the experience I had. But anyway, one of my favorite things to do was study in the actual herbal pharmacy. I would go in there and just sit at one of the big tables and study and felt like I was absorbing through osmosis, like the whole thing. And I would love to have this as a space where people can come because you can sit in any Best Western and or any Holiday Inn Express and get that extra level of knowledge that's going on. You can, but also if you're there and you're immersed in it, a lot of times what you're exposed to and the ideas that you end up getting from something like that, they may not hit that week, that month, or that year, but it could be that 5 years later, like with my business is not an overnight success. It's the past 30 years I've been doing all this stuff with all the pieces and the parts and the studying and whatever, that these things kind of hit and they come to you. So as with everything that we do, I'm hoping that it can provide some inspiration, even whether it's in person, or whether it's through videos that I share and things like that. And in person is always great because there's nothing that beats the smell of good Chinese medicine that's going on, whether it's in a clinic or whether it's in like a warehouse. Our warehouse always smells interesting and good.
Yeah, and imagine at the scale and quantity you're doing, that warehouse is going to be pretty aromatic.
It should be neat. Yeah, the staff gets on me sometimes because I'm not Mr. Glove and mask guy. So on the days that I'm back there clarifying, I'm immune to it. But they walk in, they're like,
Yeah,
because I'm adding camphor and menthol and mixing it.
yeah,
So I'll, this new place will have better ventilation. I'll be a little more cognizant of that. I mean, I don't know. It's probably giving me more character than I had 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe it'll end up giving me even more character.
yeah. Something happens. You're around this stuff enough, it changes you. I think that there's something to be said about that proximity effect too, and learning things that are there's the explicit. I found, okay, for me, I found that when I go to seminars, I mean, I've taught some, I've attended a bunch, and there's the explicit agenda items of, okay, here's what we're talking about at this seminar. It's damp diseases or stroke recovery or whatever. Like there's a topic, or you go to a symposium, there's a bunch of speakers with their official topics and they give their presentations and it's good. You learn stuff. But then there's all that stuff that happens on the breaks. in the hallways.
Yeah.
If you get a bunch of people together and you're going into a big old Airbnb and you've got like 6 bedrooms and a bunch of, and you're up at like 2 a.m., usually with some whiskey or something. But that's like all this kind of magic happens, and it's all this unplanned stuff. The agenda items are great, but when there's a room for the spontaneous and the implicit things, and also the stuff that happens just via exposure to other humans and picking up little micro pieces of a new culture or new sets of assumptions, that stuff's really, really hard to put on a flyer as like, here's the benefits of coming to my thing, right? But when you feel it, you start to see, I think that actually moves the most weight in terms of our growth and development. It's all this
Uh,
weird stuff.
I would say without a doubt, we've got, you know, 120,000 years of oral tradition around campfires, and you take 20 brains, you put them around a campfire, they all have 20 levels of experience, 20 levels of expertise, and just the conversation and things that we get, we're wired for that. You know what I mean? We're wired to take somebody's idea and it generates other things within us, or it generates a story within us that triggers other people's ideas and things like that. I think we're starting to find that out as a culture too. I spent a decade teaching internationally. That's where I did most of my hands-on osteopathic, physical type stuff. And there's nothing like it. And you even see it when you get in different populations. So let's say you get in a bunch of orthopedists, orthopedic acupuncturists or hands-on people, and then you get in a bunch of exercise people, and then you get in a bunch of internal medicine people. You get a whole different feel of it. And then what you bring to it brings, things to them. So I completely agree. I think, one of the things that the pandemic and the online experience has done is it's gotten really, really good. But I'll be honest with you, it's nothing like the in-person experience. And I think we're starting to realize that. There's information that's available and very freely available these days. But getting with people and learning in that way, I think we've just been wired to do that. So I
Yeah, I
totally agree
agree.
with that.
Yeah, even doing these interviews and stuff, it's a convenience. It's a matter of convenience, right? Like, hey, come do the podcast and all that. We can carve out a couple hours instead of a couple days to travel and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's like if I had my pick, you know.
And I think a nice blend is what the future is going to be, or the near future is going to be. Um, well, yeah, we'll see. And that's, my mission is to. I can't see myself again having time to actually teach some of the things that I used to teach, which I think are exceedingly important. Some of the osteopathic medicine. But I can see myself being somewhere for 2 to 4 hours for an intensive, being somewhere to give a 30-minute or 45-minute intro, being somewhere and being involved in all that. But also, one of the great things about being successful with something is that I can give away a lot of this information for free. So, you know, clips on this, clips on that, things that I think are really important, things that I think people aren't doing anymore or are losing. That's kind of one of our missions. So I always enjoy when I can get something unique into the hands of newer practitioners or even old practitioners. I learn stuff. Fortunately, I learn stuff new every day, most every day.
Yeah, there's definitely a hierarchy of value going where we've got access to all these facts. I'm constantly kind of spouting this stuff on social media, but we have access to all this information, and then it's like that's great, and we don't have it. That's awful, right? But we do have it, and now we get like information overload. So the information itself was valuable, but now it's like, how do we organize it, right? How do we prioritize things? How do you take, so for example, the example I usually use is somebody with fibromyalgia or brain fog, and they don't know what to do because they hit a dead end with the medical system. So
Mhm.
now they're on Google and they have not hit a dead end. They've hit 10 billion results, or they're on PubMed. And it's like, this is the opposite problem.
And usually the first page is trash.
Yeah.
It's like it's definitely doom and gloom, and you're gonna die.
Yeah. So all that comes, right? And then it's like now there's a skill set to organizing information, to be able to take that complexity and start to distill it for somebody and go, here's probably your next best step. Here's your next best step after that. And there's also, I do believe, a value add around bringing people together around that, kind of to your point of like community and all that. We do well kind of siloed out doing our own research and all that, but I think that we do better in group environments. And this is one of the things that I've been finding, because I'm always like shouting about going online for practitioners, right? It's something that I had to figure out. I always wanted to do it. I had to figure it out. It was really hard for a while. But when you go online, the temptation is to forget that you're dealing with real humans on the other end of the devices, right? So I think like the highest goal of going online is, yes, get information, organize the information, use social media and other networks like private chat communities and all this kind of stuff to get people together, and then get offline and get together, right? Get offline and go do real things. And then I think this is probably the best we can do in terms of leveraging this technology, in terms of like connecting people and getting it to actually become something that impacts your life in a significant multifaceted way. Let me put it that way.
Right.
So there's a lot of potential out there. And for practitioners to work online, and you can kind of like see patients and interface with patients or clients or whatever you call them, legally, whatever that's going to be. It's really good to bring the humanity back to that, so that it's not just like dry facts.
Yeah, sure.
Because you could take that talk you want to give about osteopathic information or whatever. I mean, you could just record that once and have a killer thing, right? And then you just have some life around that. That's what gathers people together. It's like you use the information as kind of just that first move. Like you say, I'll give things out for free, and it accumulates a tribe, which
Well, I've even thought about that with some of the more difficult topics because there used to be, I used to offer either 3-day courses or I would do certifications over the period of like a week or so. But then I, over the years, started offering intensive because with the intensive, I would require, there were like prerequisites where you had to be big enough to ride this ride. Because what happens with any typical in-person seminar is you get together and you've got people of all different backgrounds. So you've got to sit there and you've got to read the room for the first half a day and see what the level is. Is the level super high? Okay, you need to be on your game. Is the level down here? Well, then let's hold hands and let's go through this together, which is just fine. But for intensive, like you're saying, I think that might even be more the future of trainings now, is once you've had this seminar, once you've used this, method before, then if you get to an intensive or you get to a master class or you get to something that's in person, oh, we only give these in person. Oh, why? I just want to take it in my living room. When you get in person, you figure out why really, really quickly, because then all of a sudden the palpations are set in. Then all of a sudden the nuances of talking with other people, like even with something like say an intake, they're all of a sudden very, very apparent that you can't do that over this medium. You know what I mean? This medium is great, but it definitely has its limitations.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm in contact with some people going through acupuncture school currently and through the pandemic, and it was like their needle technique classes were on Zoom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, geez, you really can't count that. You're going to have to get your hands on some people. And the students that I talk to, they're like, I know, I can't stand this. I feel like there's a whole other layer to things that I can't even get at, like literally can't touch, because how are you supposed to learn it from watching a
Well,
screen,
and from the teaching aspect, it gets a little tough. I taught a class for a college, not a class. I think I guest taught for a couple of hours, and as I'm teaching, um, 3/4 of the videos were not muted. They were dark. They had no
Yeah.
video that were going on. I mean, so what I had to do as a teacher is all of a sudden, instead of gauging these people and what they needed, I had to go ahead and just pretend like I'm talking to the camera and talking to myself, which I can do, but it's a whole different way of expressing things to people, and it's yeah, it's interesting what we've come into.
It really is. I mean, you hit on kind of a meta skill about that, about being able to take feedback from your audience
Mhm.
and be able to kind of on the fly, like adapt how you're talking and backing up and explaining things different ways, because maybe you're talking to somebody who's more of a auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner, and you're
Mhm.
speaking in visual terms, and you can see their eyes glazing over and you can kind of like go back. But when you don't have that feedback, that's one of my rules. If I'm doing a Zoom thing, which, I rarely do these things, but like when I'm doing an event where people are zooming in, leave your camera on.
Yeah,
I don't care if you're eating your
I'd like to see your
breakfast.
pretty face.
Yeah,
Like
like
to
if
see your
you've
cat.
got eggs hanging off your fine, like, but just keep it on so I know you're there. But that is a separate skill of going, okay, I'm just talking into the void here. And this is something that like practitioners kind of come into my ecosystem, and that's one of the things they say, like, I want to get on social media, I've got a lot of stuff to share, but I turn on a camera and I'm just blank. But when I'm in the clinic talking to patients, I can just tell them all these things, and it's like epiphany after epiphany. And I tell them, listen, you've just got to imagine the patient. Like, you've just got to take that one person that you really love talking to about this thing and just pretend it's a video for them,
Yeah.
because otherwise you got no feedback. You are just shouting into the void, and it can be kind of weird at first.
Well, and it's a good point. For me to produce any of the stuff that I produce, I I will fix this at some point in the future, but I can't for right now. If I take a picture or I do a video, most of the time it has to be me doing that to myself because whenever
Oh yeah.
somebody else does it, it adds a layer of weirdness. Like if I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to talk to myself about something, I'm really good about that. I don't look at all my little nuances and little things that are they're weird or whatnot. So yeah, it is. And it is kind of necessary. I think that we have a flood of things that aren't necessary. You know, drink water, eat food, get sunshine. Exercise. Which it has a purpose, and it has a purpose of giving a potential patient a feel for who they're going to see, which I do think is important. But at the same time, or like, this is how you needle Li11. You put it in this far, and you're like, why does anybody need to really, get technical? So there is that, but it's a budgeting type thing. We don't know where it's going. It's going so fastly. But getting familiar with it, I think, is kind of important for people, breaking out of that shell a little bit and actually realizing that nobody really cares. I mean, that sounds bad, but they really don't. Like, if you flub it, you might get. I mean, somebody might say something about it. A couple people might, but no, it
Yeah.
doesn't
Well, actually, you'll get more negative comments when you do something good.
matter. Yeah, sometimes.
You know,
But
it's like, oh, I hit it. This is good.
I want you to also remember things live forever. So back in like 2003, maybe, I was approached by a company that was doing, they were doing videos for Wiki or something, and they were getting paid a certain amount. And they were like, well, the internet's taken off. And if you do some for us, we want you to come in. Here's a list. Come in and ad lib these things for an hour. We'll have them all edited, blah, blah, blah. So over the course of several different times, like with acupressure, I produced hundreds of these like little videos that, if you ever want a really good laugh, you can see acupuncture baby Mark, from 20 some years ago, talking about fertility or erectile dysfunction or whatever. I would just go up there and ad lib, and they're it's nothing horrible, but it's still, they live.
Yeah.
They
Oh, yeah. It's like
have
having your
hundreds of
junior
thousands
high.
of views. They've been living for decades.
Yeah, it's like having your junior high yearbook photos out there for
Oh
the world to see.
yeah.
It's good though. You go through it. I think it's a rite of passage. I've done plenty of stuff that was cringy and horrible and all that while I was kind of finding my feet with how to put myself out there, how to, what to talk about, the nerves, like you said, having a cameraman involved, or a camera lady.
Ooh,
And then you're
yeah.
kind of thinking like, do they think this is garbage? Am I saying anything good? And it's like, now you got a nice video of you sweating is what you got,
Yeah, yeah. Good stuff. But again, go back to that, to encourage people to do it. Nobody really cares. So throw some stuff out there. You know, See if you like it or if you don't, and then delete it if you want to.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did in the beginning is, if I put something out there, and a post is used to getting 10, 20 responses or something like that, and within a couple hours it gets nothing, I'm like, well, let's just take that off of there, because I'm doing something weird I don't know that I'm doing, or something that isn't engaging. Because you do, and sorry, but I'm going to soapbox this for 1 minute.
Hit it.
If one of the biggest problems we have in the profession of Chinese medicine, like, it is the biggest problem that we have, in my opinion. There's a bunch of problems, but here's our biggest one: is people fail to understand properly something from Business 101 30 years ago called target market. And I've probably said this a million times over the past years, but you have to know who your target market is. That means, who is your patient? I could say with Evil Bone Water, oh, everybody could use it. Oh, well, that's maybe true. That's not my target market, though. I need to know how old they are, what education level they are, male or female. I need to know uh, how much money they make. I need to know where they live. I need to know what they like to do. I need to the more that you narrow down who your target market is, when you speak, always speak to your target market. Otherwise, you're just wasting money. When you go to an event, if it's not your target market, it's going to get you nothing. When you set up a clinic, if there's nobody in that area that's in your target market, you're not going to make any money. When I set up my clinic in St. Simons Island, Georgia, somebody asked me, knowing from my seminar type stuff that I did, they're like, come up here and take a look at it and just see if you like the place and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whatever. I had some negative connotations with that area of coastal Georgia because there used to be a pulp mill that smelled really bad when you drove down the interstate, right? Horrible. So I never stopped there. Didn't even know the islands were there. My ex-wife had actually grown up there, so I was just going to humor everybody. I get there within 60 days. I had a new clinic. I had a new place to work. And one of the major reasons is because 74% of that island are women over the age of 40, 45, slightly more intelligent, slightly more educated, slightly more affluent. Not coincidentally, do you know what the demographic for acupuncture was at the time? Women over the age of 45, slightly more affluent, slightly more educated, slightly more whatever, athletic. So it fit 100%. I was like, if I fail in this demographic, how am I going to fail? I didn't set up in a mill where there's a town where there's a steel mill, where I would have to like convince every single steel worker to come in because, but target market, even with products, with everything, your stuff's great. You're great, I promise. But not everybody is your target market. Sorry, soapbox. I'm getting off the soapbox now.
No, it's a great reminder. I would also add that depending on what kind of sale we're making, we have to start to become aware of how many beliefs we're asking somebody to pause or expand in order to work with us. So, if you get evil bone water into the VA system, that's one less belief you're asking people to change. Because if you've got somebody who's a veteran who's used to the VA system and then they're saying, here's what we're using for this, you don't have to like sell them on Eastern medicine or whatever, because it comes from a trusted channel. The less beliefs that we ask somebody to pause, the less cognitive distance they're going to have, the less objections we're going to get, the less erratic, squirrely behavior we get. Oh, my patients are blowing off their appointments and all that. Well, how many beliefs did you ask them to pause or change in order to work with you? And kind of to your point, it's like finding your target market, right? Target. I know it's such an aggressive business term, right? Like your target market, but the niche that you work really well with is going to be a damn close fit to just how you're showing up and doing what you're doing. Like you don't have to stretch their brains to get them into your world. And the other side of that is we do have skeptics, right? Skeptics can come and sometimes it takes a little bit of conversion and all that. No arm twisting, but just they have more questions. And if you get somebody to go from skeptic to success story, they're going to be like your biggest fan. But I also don't think 80% of your business should be trying to convert skeptics. It's okay to preach to the choir because you don't want to have the strain of bending beliefs all the time on top of trying to deliver a service.
Well, and you're completely right. So my practice in St. Simons, we're booked 3 months out. I've got a 90-person waiting list for new patients. It's all word of mouth. We don't advertise because in that particular community of that particular size, when they have somebody else that's already received a great experience, that takes those barriers and it just knocks them off. You know what I mean? Because now what people don't realize too that are newer, when I say newer to Chinese medicine, that have been in the business 10 or 15 years, when you go back 20 years or so, every single person had to be convinced and it was horrible. Every single person that walked through your door was convinced that you were just a witch doctor and you had to convince them otherwise. But anyway, it's not like that anymore. People are pretty well educated, and that's one of my main reasons for doing the extra that it might take to get into the VA. Because if we have all the veterans behind us, now I can't say specifics on this, but a couple years ago we had something super cool where all of a sudden some of the special forces were emailing us asking if they could get cases for combat packs and in their team stores and stuff like that. And I was like, you darn right you can, especially with me and my history and my family's history. And then just the other day, the local guys that are the special teams, the special forces for Joint Command, they ended up coming and picking up the case, and they didn't even hear about it through me or through an acupuncturist this time. A friend of ours that has a facial company, her husband is one of those guys. So when you get people like that that are behind you organically, then that skeptic that doesn't use anything from China or from whatever else, you're like, well, special forces guys use it, and you're like, oh, okay, well, let me see. So with that, I think that's what we've been doing over the past 10 or 15 years, whether we've known it or not. We've been taking these barriers to use or barriers to getting in with us, and we've been knocking them down, knocking them down, knocking them down. Our last barrier, in my opinion, is the herbal barrier, because there's a lot of doctors that the herbs are still dangerous. And because what you'll do is you'll get somebody that's self-medicating that goes into one of the Chinese groceries here locally and takes 5 things, and all of a sudden, my wife's looking at him, looking at Rod, one of her fellow nurses, and going, Rod, you're not looking so good. You're kind of yellow. Have you been checked out recently? And Rod's like, I'm not really feeling so good. And he goes down and gets a blood test, and his liver's freaking off the chain because he's taking a half a bottle of Shou Wu a day. And then he's taking like 5 other herbal formulas that he's cobbled together. And I think one of the difficulties with that is that, uh, and rightfully so, doctors of any type don't believe that our stuff is so difficult that it takes years to learn. Because if you're a doctor, you should be able to have enough information where with a good freaking weekend or something, you can master whatever it is. You can go off, and with a few weekends, you can be a surgeon. With a few weekends, you can do this. A few weekends, you do that. And it's just one of those things that they distrust, and they distrust with some good reasons. I always tell my patients, like, look, you have to get your stuff from trusted sources. I make sure they're all trusted sources, like for me, because really there are some sources that can jack you up or have whatever in them.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, in a kind of ironic twist there, a lot of things that have superior in the name are tainted with pharmaceuticals anyway. And it's like now you're getting
or I
herbs
had
that don't work that are generating mistrust in the medical community, but it's because they had Mickey slipped in them basically.
I had a discussion today. Hold on one second. I had a discussion today with someone that they were talking about GMP, because GMP, like when we go to get the certification for the VA, if we so desire to do so, if we desire to do so, they were saying, when I see, I forgot about this because this is part of my past. They were like, when I see GMP, I still take it with a little bit of care, because there's companies that'll throw that in there, and I don't necessarily trust them yet. You know what I mean? And one of the things is, people don't realize that FDA and GMP really only mean, it's just a process. It has zero to do with quality of the product. It says in the verbiage, of the making standards of the highest quality. They don't care what you put in there. What they mostly care about, unfortunately, we're finding, is if I didn't want to make it all natural and I wanted to throw in a pharmaceutical, or I wanted to throw in something that was chemical, we could get approved with all this stuff like that. That would not be a problem. But since I don't want to put those things in, it's like it's stacked against us in a little bit of a way. So if I could end up getting uh, VA into the VA, for instance, with it all natural, and give other people a path to be able to do that, I think those barriers that you're talking about will come down so significantly for all of us. Because if they've got this thing that every veteran's like, you got to give me some of this to their, to their freaking primary, you know, veterans can be really annoying, like me. They can be really annoying and very persistent, especially if they find something that's very impactful or they like it. So imagine if they're in there and all of these doctors are going, well, they're not asking for opiates, they're asking for something natural. And then they see that it's Chinese medicine, and then they're like, well, I wasn't going to, but do you want to get some acupuncture visits? Or in the places that don't have those big things, do you want to get a referral to somebody local in the community that can do acupuncture visits? You're exactly right. Those built-in barriers that people have. Mm.
So, are you thinking of having kind of specific educational resources for the prescribing physicians so that you could basically have like a physician's guide to evil bone water and start kind of opening up like, this is the herbs that we're using. Some of these have been refined into pharmaceuticals over time or whatever. Here's what they're doing. If your patients are responding well to this, consider referring to local acupuncturists. Like, are you thinking about some kind of
A
pump
little bit.
priming.
A
Yeah.
little bit. So what we're going to have, we're pretty sure that we can be used in the VAs by the acupuncture physicians. We're pretty sure that we crossed that barrier. So now we're working on the getting prescribed barrier. And what we're going to do is we're going to have little cards that have a little QR on them, right? That take them to one page that's specifically intended for a physician, for
There
the
we go.
VA, for whatever, that gives them not all that, gives them bullets, but then at the end gives them resources for all the other stuff. Because so I've been doing this stuff for, I hate to even say it, I've been doing this stuff for 33 years. That's ridiculous. But anyway, so I've been doing this for 33 years. And what's been my experience with every physician that I've dealt with is they're not going to read more than a paragraph. And I want you guys that are listening to this to remember that too. If you send a physician something compelling about your practice or this, that, and the other, and it's more than like a short paragraph, they aren't going to read it. It's going to go into the pile of stuff they intend to read that they're never going to. So by making it really, really short and effective, and that's what's been taking like a bit of time. I want them to look at something. I want them to say active ingredients, inactive ingredients, safety, efficacy. I want them to say precautions, right?
Yep.
And then basically we're going to also include how many units sold, how many whatever. People might not realize it, but we're at 60 to 90 cases a week now after 6 years. We're probably pushing 300,000 bottles with no real issues or problems. And that's the kind of stuff that physicians want to hear. Like if you're reaching out to them, acupuncture, and especially with all the dry needling stuff that's going on in the hands of different people, dry needling is good if it's in the hands of the right person, right? But when you put that stuff out there, like, look, we have no problems. We have no claims. Like, I've been practicing for 30 years. I don't have a single malpractice claim. I don't have a single. We've had a couple of injuries, but they're injuries that would be like somebody getting off your table that's got really thin skin that all of a sudden is bleeding all over the place. That can happen anywhere. And if you have a good rapport with your patients, that really doesn't matter anyway. But that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, is it safe? Does it have contaminants? Is it effective? And am I going to get in trouble for prescribing it? That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Loss aversion, risk aversion. Yeah. You just cover that. Yeah. This will be good. You're doing that, putting that together, get the indications and all that. I need all that info from you for the Weaver project I'm doing as well. So when you get that, I will take it because I want to have you in our database as a treatment algorithm node.
Absolutely. We've already got it together. I'm just doing the procrastination of perfection on it at the moment. That's what they say. The shadow of perfection is procrastination. So we've got it. We'll probably be ready to pull the trigger on all that. Because also for other makers, what you need to get probably sooner than later that we've delayed on, we do things as it becomes necessary, because until you have a proof of product, until you're making money, it really doesn't make sense to do a lot of these crazy regulatory things and this, that, and the other. But like a material safety data sheet on it. Example, somebody calls 3 years ago and is like, my patient just called and said they drank some. And I'm like, why would somebody do that? And I guess somebody had made them some elderberry syrup that was in a similar Boston Brown bottle. And so, I mean, you're going to know after like one sip that you shouldn't have drank what you just drank, right? But anyway, so I'm sitting there and I found myself, this is 3, 4 years ago, scrambling. I'm like, well, exactly how much camphor is in there, and exactly how toxic is camphor, and exactly how toxic is natural as opposed to synthetic. Come to find out, you'd have to drink about 2 bottles to have a real problem with evil bone water. But that's the kind of stuff that might need to be on your site, online. So, and again, if so with Jeremy's stuff, when he lists it, you may want to take a look at that or look at our website, because I'm going to try to keep this to just what the physicians want to hear. They don't read those long drug inserts that are in any of their drugs. They read none of it. They read the little quick blurb at the top. So we're going to make it similar. Whatever it is, whether it's you know, whether it's a persnickety patient, whether it's the old redneck patient, whether it's this patient, you have to speak to your audience, just like your target market. So when we're talking about interfacing with physicians on whatever level it is. We have to speak their language. They're busy. So
Yeah, that's one of the things I actually appreciated a lot about when you first kind of hit the scene with these was even the naming of it being kind of like a little bit dark, a little bit playful. It sets the tone around. It's not this thing that seems like so fragile and unattainable, or having that the wellness veneer of Instagram. This kind of like
right.
high life, kind of thing. It's just like evil bone water. And there's enough appeal there that you can move from niche to niche because, like your kind of like blue collar patient is curious about that. Just like, your what'd you say, 45 years and up, higher than average, athletic, intelligent woman, like what all these different people from different walks of life, at least in my experience, like with my clinic and talking about this, everybody responds to this with pretty much the same kind of curious smirk, regardless of niche, background, whatever. They're like, what? And then you can get going on the actual conversation because you kind of, there's something about beliefs, right? You can kind of open a curiosity opens up beliefs, right? So if you're like, yeah, it's evil bone water, and they're like, what the fuck? And now you got the doors open, and you're like, yeah, it's really good for bruises and whatever you got going on over here with your elbow and this kind of thing. It's
So
a really well named
let me
product for
tell
that
you
reason.
a fun lesson in feng shui. All right, I've done this with a lot of different things over the years, but we definitely did it with our label and our name because everybody's heard the name story. It was a bad translation. I still don't know why my docs in school called it that. The guys from China, I have no idea. But when I wanted to make mine, instead of Shenggu Shui, Shengjiegu Shui, rectify evil bone water, correct evil bone water, vanquish evil bone water, whatever it was, I'm like, I got to name it that because I've told this story thousands and thousands of times over the years to get people to remember Shenggu Shui when I prescribed it to them because I've never in 30 years had a patient come in and say, "Can I have some more Shenggu Shui?" They would not even approach trying to speak that Chinese. So I'm like, that's what I called it. So they would call it bone juice. They would call it, whatever they called it. But what we did, this is an interesting thing for you that, like I said, I've done this with several things, but we made the labels for probably way too long. For several years, we made them on our own inkjet printer because they kill inkjet printers. They're 20 some cents a piece to process as opposed to two cents. And our label is still not our final label. We're going to have to do something that's a little bit more inclusive of a few things. But anyway, but all that time when we were developing, what I would do is we would put bottles with the label, especially for the first year. We would put them up front at the front desk, and we've got a pretty brisk clinic. So what we would do is we would keep changing the label and changing how much the name was visible until people started to pick it up. And then when people started to pick it up, that was one thing. But if we tweaked it a little more, we found people started to pick it up and ask a question. So it was like when it finally messed with that wind or water enough where they were like, "Oh, well, what is this?" That's when we were like, "Ah, we got this label pretty close." And sometimes it wasn't even the name. Sometimes it was the size of the font, it was the color, it was the ring around it, it was the color of that. It was just little tiny things which do your little market research. So, and I see a lot of good products out there with a lot of lacking labels. Now ours is lacking in like what would be on a CVS store or the regulation type thing, all of our information. But we're wholesaling to acupuncture physicians, we're wholesaling to professionals. So that negates that at the moment. But with other ones, if it's just a whole bunch of words on it, or it's just like a one note thing, it's adequate. But you want something that people are going to look at and be like, what is that? Which incidentally it should be what you look at with a flyer or a business card too. I always try to produce things so that if somebody looks at it, they are going to grab it whether they like your stuff or not and go, "Oh, that's really cool." You know what I mean? They tend to hold on to it. So we recently were putting some little stickers. I don't know if I have any right now. We were putting some little stickers in our boxes. We like to give a lot of freebies in our boxes, and this is just one that we kind of came up with. I don't know if you
Yep.
can see that, right?
Yep.
And so I wasn't 100% sure about it. We were putting them on and whatnot. So we went out to this bar that's a 70s theme, Goodnight John Boy. And I just had a bunch in my pocket. When I say that, we go out on a Wednesday night with our neighbor that at 70, and we have a couple of drinks, and then we go there, and we're home in bed by 11. I'm I'm past that other stage of my life. So anyway, I had a whole bunch in my pocket one time, and so I put them at the bar, and they're at the bar, and all of a sudden, I see people over there, and they're like passing them out to one another, and they're going, "Oh, this is cool! This is cool!" And by the end of the night, they had circulated around enough that someone actually came up and stuck one on me and said, "Here, you need one of these," and I'm like, that's good market research.
Yeah.
That means that people like it, no matter they know, what it is or what they don't. And think about that. Think about something that's visually appealing, that makes people question a little bit. I think that your materials and your name and your marketing are really pretty important to things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even my kids like the name of it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, they know where it is. They know where to go get it in the bathroom because all summer all they're doing is falling off bikes, smashing their legs up on rocks and whatever. And they know they get a bruise, they go grab it, they
That's
spray
awesome.
their legs, they love it, and they still get a kick out of this evil part in the word, and they're like, why is it so evil? And I'm like, it's not the spray, it's your bones that are evil, and it's gonna pass.
And I love that we've heard from so many people that their kids end up wanting their own bottle, and half the time the kids aren't even saying what they're using it for, but it works on pimples, it works on all sorts of things, and I think I might love that more than anything else, because what I've noticed with my kids and my stepson is that when you get them reaching for stuff like that earlier, when they start to get into their late teens and early 20s, they reach for natural first, and then they go to the other. I'm not anti drug or any surgery or whatever, but they all have their purpose and definitely don't need to be overused. So when you can get a kid that all of a sudden has it in their brain that, okay, this tea that I drink, this chrysanthemum crystals that I put in this tea that I drink takes care of my sinuses, or I use evil bone water and this on a pimple, it's going to make them much less likely to reach immediately for pharmaceuticals. And so I really dig stories like that there.
I agree. I think we're reclaiming our cultural inheritance. I
Yeah.
personally, I think it's been hijacked about 100 years ago, and they started with kids. So we need to work with kids to get them back to see what humans have been doing forever. I mean, this is nothing new and revolutionary.
No.
I mean, this used to just be
No,
what
not
it
at all.
was.
This is just the way things are supposed to be made. That's all
Yeah,
there is to it.
we're
But
just
what's
getting.
interesting about that, I've contemplated that a lot over the years, because whenever you hear some old person talk about something that's super crazy, when you really dig down and drill into it a little bit, you're like, oh, that wasn't crazy. That was just different than it is today. Like natural turpentine or pine
Yeah,
oil is super medicinal, where the drugstore stuff is super toxic, right? But I think what happened is, as we were all immigrating to America, there was this real desire to be American. So you didn't want anything that tagged you as Italian, as Jewish, as Scottish, as Middle Eastern. So we took all of these old remedies that worked so well, and we're just like, oh no, that's crazy old people stuff. And it became crazy old people stuff, especially as the drugs emerged to take over its place. And then it became so crazy that people forgot how grandma used to do it.
there's two things about this liniment that I wanted to talk about. One of them is that this idea of slow living, which I'm a big fan of, and so it's almost like a statement against our current go 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 cultures. Like, I'm going to just slow down my nervous system and all that. And I've noticed, for me, I know this is going to sound kind of weird, but if I have a little, a sore tendon or a bruise or whatever, and I think, oh, I should go get the bone water if the kids haven't drained it at this point, I'll go to the cupboard, I'll go get it. And I find myself kind of stopping, I'll spray it on, I'm rubbing it around. And it's a weird thing, man, but like everything slows down when I do that. And for probably the next half an hour, maybe an hour, when I can feel it and smell it, I feel like my sense of time is different. And it's one of these things where I never, ever would have kind of associated like spraying a liniment on with kind of, I don't want to say meditative, but it just does. I feel more kind of rooted. I feel more connected to just a normal pace of life, like a human should, not this like,
So I'll tell you what's really interesting about that. Back in the, gosh, forever ago, when Russia did super, super well in the Olympics, like just killed us all, we later found out a lot of that was steroids. But I studied a lot when I was in high school of their training techniques and the things that they did. Some of them were extreme, but some of them were really good. And one of them was, oh, now I can't remember the name of it. I don't want, it's not guided meditation, but intentional thought during lucid times of sleep. So when you're falling asleep, when you're waking up, you think to yourself, I see myself running 30 seconds faster a mile. I see this healing, like in whatever thing that you think about doing it in. So I see little construction guys that are in there that are scraping things, or I see little fiberglass and fiberglass that are in there, geek. I know, but they whatever it is, it seems to have not seems, there's studies that have shown that it has a tremendous value and a tremendous difference, because you are directing your immune system, you are directing your nervous system to that. Proven, right? um, but also there's interesting things that happen with that, and because I'm always like a with evil bone to rub it in. So with any running, you could spray it, right? Maybe for just bug prevention or spray it, but I like rubbing it in because you're again giving that intention. I had an interesting thing happen to me over the years in the infantry. They put me on almost every single weapon system and this and that and the other, because not only was I a good shot, but I didn't complain about carrying stuff. Whatever, I'll carry the 60 gun, I'll carry this and that. But what it ended up doing is it ended up leaving like a kind of a massive shoulder adhesion, and like a ball, almost like a cyst and fibrous ball that was back there. And it took them, gosh, 4 or 5 different times to actually over all the years finally get it where it didn't come back. I didn't have the most stellar treatment in the first 2 or 3 surgeries. But anyway, there was something that was really interesting that happened every single time that gave me sort of a window into what we're meant to do, as people. I'm about 6'3" and 220 something, right? So the opportunities that I've had over my life where people come up and pat me on the shoulder really aren't a lot. People don't come up and pat me on the shoulder because, and I'm not surly. I'm just quiet sometimes. So I don't think that I'm intimidating, but I don't know. But anyway, I just don't get patted on the shoulder. But every single time that's been in a healing phase, and that first 2 to 3 weeks are when it's becoming predominantly negative charged, and the blasphemous forming, and the whole thing's happening. Every single time, I swear to you, no less than 4 or 5 people come up and tap me on the shoulder. And I think it's something that we're electrically wired to do. We are wired to take something and rub it, when it hurts or when it has a problem. So yeah, I not just a meditative state, but I think almost like a healing state, directing healing attention to something. There's more to be said in that than we could possibly imagine, which is also why they're talking about. There's rumblings. There's been rumblings for years of the FDA totally removing the placebo. And the problem is that the placebo sometimes does as much or more than the actual drug or the treatments that are going on, because the people, they have intent towards the area, and in some cases don't have the drugs or the other treatments that are preventing them from working. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
It's a very interesting thing. And the other bit too, these are both kind of psychological observations. I've just noticed my sense of time slows down when I do these kinds of things. And the other is kind of how we were talking about, oh, that was grandma's way, and now we have this modern thing. I've noticed this really wild phenomenon where people they want to go back. They want to get out of this culture a little bit, and they want to go back to natural, normal stuff, how it used to be. And you almost give them a little window of permission to do it. And I can watch them jump through the window, and they get a little bit happy that they're like allowed to do it. And so when you start doing this stuff with like, oh, it's liniments, it's herbs and all, and there's this little bit where they're like, oh, and they've seen it. They maybe saw
Mhm.
it 40 years ago or
Mhm.
whatever. And you can kind of spark that. And it's really interesting because there's so much subconscious stuff going on. Especially, I had one lady in particular I'm remembering. She was from the Philippines, and I hit her with some of this. She rolled her ankle or something. She was in for acupuncture, and I was like, I'm gonna spray some liniments on, and she's like, oh yeah, liniments. She's still got a thick accent, but she's been in America forever. And I sprayed it on her, and she was face down, in the face cradle on the table, and I just hear her muffled voice, and she's like, "Is that licorice?" I was like, "Man, you got a good nose, lady." And she's like, "Wow, that's like what my grandma used to use." And something happened there where we went way beyond a mechanical orthopedic treatment, I'm not trying to go in there and like do all this fragile stuff to the shen or whatever, but it's like watching this kind of person, like something sparked in there. She was so happy. She got up, she's all smiling and all that. She's smiling not necessarily because of acupuncture and things like that, but she's smiling because something in her brain just came back to life. And
Right.
it's really cool. You can do a lot of cool stuff with this.
So what's interesting about that too is one of the other liniments I use in clinic. I use Postamon, I use Dr. Bob's, I use a little bit of Red Emperor's, but Postamon has been one of my mainstays for a long time, and it's complex. It's got a lot of herbs in it, but depending on what culture the person's from, they universally smell something different. Some
Oh yeah.
smell the cloves. I don't smell the cloves. Some smell the mint. Some smell the cinnamon. Some smell the, it's kind of cool. And we do create a lot of associations with that. What's interesting about the natural things too. I talked to you about no reactions and whatnot. During the pandemic, we've been a pretty stable business, both my clinic and my because of the way we handle things, both my clinic and Evil Bone Water. But when all the clinics were closing during the pandemic, everybody had a problem, right? So obviously, Evil Bone Water sales, and when we're getting right in the middle of getting really up and running, they did a little funny stuff, and so we started making a hand sanitizer. We don't have this for sale anymore. We have old stock that we mostly just service clinics that we sold it to before with, and I'll tell you why we even do that. And this is real food for thought for people that are wanting to make stuff. So we made this hand sanitizer because we just happened to have access to Everclear 190, which a lot of people didn't because they were making hand sanitizer and stuff with it. We only just to let you know now after the pandemic, we only deal with people. I there are very few companies that I press click to order with. I want a representative. I want somebody I know because when you have a person like we used to, they take care of you. Like they really, really do. They'll call you up in advance and say, "Oh, you're running low on this, you're running on that." So we only deal with people. But one of our people from the beginning was a family-owned liquor store that all of them have been patients of ours before. So they they greatly appreciate our $170,000 a year of business that we give them, which is just insane. But great people. They always take care of us. They lay on these like suppliers like crazy to make sure that we're taken care of. They order in advance. They keep us extra stocked. It's wonderful. Um, the only part that I feel bad about making my own alcohol for because I don't want to cut them out. But they probably knew it was going to happen sooner or later. So anyway, we start making hand sanitizer with just fresh aloe, camphor, menthol, and Everclear 190 because that is what we had. People had a problem getting it. We're like, we'll just make this, and we're like, whatever. It's just to fill in the gap. It's just to help people. I think we initially gave out more bottles than we actually sold. You know what I mean? Because it's not real cost effective when you do it with the natural products like that. You don't use the denatured isopropyl. It's not super cost effective. So it wasn't like it was cheap. But then the reason that we still, all these years later, keep doing it is because there is one particular population type of clinic that keeps ordering it. Any guesses? Any guesses? It is the pediatrics because evidently, and this should tell us something about the state of our food, of our medicine, of our products, or whatever. So, all of these kids that have all of these sensitivities to all of these substances or drugs or whatnot have no reaction to natural camphor, natural menthol, natural alcohol, and natural aloe. They just don't. So, they keep ordering it because all the other hand sanitizers and stuff they have reactions to. And and that it's sad to me and it makes me wonder, but it's also one of the things that lets me know that there's a huge market for this. If people, I'm only ever going to make Evil Bone Water. That was just a diversion that was
Yeah.
necessary at the time. But if people sort of start to step up and create things that are in our profession, I'm hoping to be able to go ahead and drive through figuring out how to get those natural things approved on a larger scale if necessary, so that there will be a path for people to follow, so to speak. But even if there's not a path to follow, or you're not going to get that big, think about the thousands of kids that you'll help that can use a product that doesn't have the crap in it. And a lot of times, I've always thought this anyway. It's not the cinnamon; it's the pesticides that are used to it, or it's not the angelica, it's the preservative that's used for it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
I'm
quite
a little
interesting.
sour right now on the government and their regulation, where they only want to regulate drugs.
Well, I mean, you start looking at the systems of these things, and it does start to get a little bit discouraging because you can incentives start to emerge, right, based on actions and policies and things like that. And when you start to consider regulatory agencies being captured and being driven in certain ways, it doesn't really feel like you're in a fair arena anymore, which makes it harder to kind of hold your own. And then you get the whole thing with the consumer resistance of like, well, how come it's more expensive? And it's like, listen, this stuff is high quality and natural and not got a bunch of garbage added to it. It seems more expensive, but the cheaper stuff has been made cheaper artificially through subsidies. Like they're hiding the cost of these things. Plus, you got long-term costs of using this stuff. So it's a again, you have a belief conversion that has to happen, and some people understand that and they're like, I get it, I know why it costs more, I understand subsidies, I understand hidden fees, I understand all this stuff. I mean, you get the same thing with acupuncture. Oh, how come it costs this much? Well, it's because, right, you're if you go to see your doctor, that's being subsidized by everybody else in the country. So all the healthy people are paying for the sick people on a government care plan, or whatever it is. There's all these different ways where you're going to be artificially lowering the cost of certain things, and other things don't necessarily have that same whole system shell game going on. So it's just like, well, the price is what the price is because that's what the materials cost. That's just the economics of it. You got to have and like you said before about the framing with, oh, this camphor is $20, this is 70. You've been framed and anchored now at 20, so 70 looks high. But it's like, well, where did that 20 come from? And what are these hidden costs that we're not factoring in? And it starts to get really gnarly.
Well, and you know what's interesting? All I never thought that I would do family medicine, but now a lot of my practice is family medicine, because once you take somebody through a difficult problem, we have a since we're hitting hands-on acupuncture herbs all at once. We most people 3-day visits, we get them in, get them out, get them done, which people say is not a great business model. But if they come back to you for every little thing that ever happens after that, it's a good business model. But it puts a lot of pressure on me. Um, but within that, the family medicine portion of it, it becomes so, once you know this person's body and how it works, it becomes so painfully easy to treat them. And that's not what they're used to in the medical system. They're used to, like, you take this drug, all the drugs that come out now, you take forever. It's not like, oh, we only take this as needed. As needed is almost gone. You take forever. And so when they get to something, well, come back when you need me, or come back when something goes wrong, or come back for a tune-up, or just stop by and pick up herbs. I think it's going to change. I think it's going to be really, really easy to change. You develop, if you do good medicine, you develop these lifelong full family relationships with these people, where
Yep.
you eventually get to the point where you're not having to advertise, because you're just trying to serve the community that you actually have. So it is changing, and unfortunately, I think part of what's changing it too is you have a failing medical system. We have people dropping out as medical providers on the daily. You can't be an MD or a DO and work part time, since the hospitals, which are, even most standalones are owned by hospitals now, since they're paying your $100,000 to $200,000 liability insurance, they're not going to let you work 30 hours a week. They want to juice you for 40, 50 hours a week or more. And the physicians are willing, because they're like, I'll sacrifice all this for 10 or 15 years, not realizing that the average age of mortality of an MD is like around 60 something, 60, 65. So what are you exactly juicing there the last 5 years of your life? So I think it's getting to the point where people are starting to realize and be their own health advocates, because they have to. With that system being so stressed, there's people that are waiting 2, 3 months for a cardiology appointment. Where does it end up pushing them? It ends up pushing them to us. Then they get exposed to us, and then they don't need the cardiology appointment. They're like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I think that we're in. I said it for uh, Eastern medicine herbology. I mean, seriously, there's a potential gold rush right now for Eastern medicine neurology, but for treatment, it is. It's just awesome. We are really hitting a stride. It's really cool. When I say a gold rush, I want to qualify that just a little bit. So, like we really are, and one of the things that makes that possible is we've hit a day and age where you can get anything tomorrow. If I need a 19 millimeter nut that is like with a thread count for stainless steel or whatever it is, I can have two of those available tomorrow that are on my doorstep with Amazon, which is why my wife tries to keep getting me to get rid of stuff. I'm like, I don't want to get rid of that box of nuts and bolts that I've got. But at the same thing, when I can get that, I don't know what quality is. I don't know, what's going on with it. So when we make something that is great of a higher quality, and you can't just go ahead and get on Amazon or whatnot, people I think are starting to really appreciate what that quality is and what that quality means. For the first time, for years, the reason that companies like Solstice are getting away with like what they're doing to our medicine by just taking all of our stuff and making it all crap, we don't know. Not us, but most of the public, they don't know. They don't care. Lavender is lavender is lavender. Cinnamon is cinnamon is cinnamon. It's all the same thing. They don't realize the provenance of herbs is super super important to the efficacy and that's also why they try stuff and are like, well, it didn't really work for me. It's because you
Yeah.
had this crap.
Yeah. That's a
Anyway,
big
sorry, that
piece.
was a separate soapbox.
Well, I think that's a big piece to navigate with patient communication is to try to, if they're in your office or they're asking for help in some capacity, they're in your world, whether you're online or whatever, there's going to be something they tried before. And a lot of times you've got to be able to finesse that conversation so that they don't get embarrassed for having tried because they don't know that they bought something off Amazon or whatever that wasn't good. I mean, I used to tell people all the time with acupuncture, oh, I've had it before. I didn't like it. It didn't work. It hurt, whatever. And I tell them like, listen, you ever got a bad haircut? You don't give up on haircuts. You just go find a different person who does the thing in a different way. And you just keep trying until you find somebody that fits with you. I can't really give that speech now because I have given up on haircuts, right? Doma got, but it's that kind of idea. You're going to have to educate people in a way where they're okay to kind of like put their neck out and try again, especially if they feel like they tried and failed with something similar in the past. And this is kind of one of the reasons why I'm trying to push the standards of the field, which I know I probably seem like a dick sometimes on the internet, but I push myself harder than I push anybody else. And I try to push the standards of the field to where we're always doing a really good job so that when somebody comes and like tries Eastern medicine, they're gonna come in at a higher standard. And that way you don't leave a sour taste in somebody's mouth or you don't put somebody off where it could have helped them, but it's like, yeah, I'm inexperienced or whatever. I mean, you're talking about, so this whole searchable knowledge base database software suite that I'm like constructing, that's what it's meant to do, is to help even a student be able to think as if they've been doing this for like 30 years and to go through and just have a very tidy mental container where there's not big cracks for people to fall through. Because as soon as somebody falls through the cracks, now you've got to deal with that second belief of I tried it and it didn't work. And it's like we got to prevent that because it's asking so much of people, especially when their morale starts getting low about like complex chronic stuff, and it's like, have you tried Eastern medicine? Yeah, I did. That didn't work for me either. And now, I mean, people kill themselves, for being sick. And it's like, had we just had a different way to navigate our clinical thinking, maybe we could.
Well, and I like what you're doing because what most people fail with in the first 3 to 5 years, because half of us fail in 3 to 5 years after getting out of school,
That's what they say.
it's
Yeah.
that there's the forest through the trees, right? So it's an unfortunate statistic that I think it's 50% fail in 3 to 5 years. So what happens is your mind is trying to wrap around all these things that you're learning in school, but in reality, where you practice and with your demographic of people, it is fairly narrow. So if you're providing tools where the people start to get this, it starts to become ingrained in them that it's not really all that complicated. Like when I have associates come in, I'm like, look, I have 400 formulas here. I do, but you're going to use these 2 dozen all the time. It's going to seem simple, but it's actually what the people need Because it's the same demographic, it's the same environment, it's the same whatever. You're going to pull these out when you need them, but other than that, so the more that you kind of ingrain that, I think that with nothing else, it's going to get people starting to realize, look, this isn't that difficult. After they go through a program like you're talking about, and it's the fifth person where they've been led down the same line, they're going to go, wait a minute, this is really that easy, and the people are getting better. Yeah, it really is that easy. But it's so hard to see in the beginning. I mean, we get out of school and we have got so much circulating through our brains and so many things that they've taught us because they really had to. But nobody ever tells us that they're teaching us to treat anywhere in the world. But then when you get to your world in the deep south here, I treat deficient damp heat all day long, every day. If I was in Arizona, I would never treat damp heat all day long, every day. I never treat dry here. I never even think I treat true cold. I treat cool, except the only time I treat true cold is in the middle of summer when everybody is hiding from AC to AC, and so they're over chilling themselves.
Yep.
That's kind of it. And so, yeah, I think anything that can, I think that's what I think that's how people fail. They can't get how it all fits together. And so they're doing what they think they're supposed to do, and it's not working. So then they start to think, oh, well, the herbs don't work. Oh, well, the acupuncture don't work. And I will tell you something with great certainty. If the herb doesn't work, if the formula doesn't work, you gave them the wrong prescription or the wrong formula. And I tell my patients that to I've always told my patients that to put me under a microscope.
Yep.
I'm like, look, if this doesn't work, I gave you the wrong formula or I gave you the wrong diagnosis, and we'll fix it. Because I'm not charging a mint for mine either, but they really do work that much. I hate to tell you that. You don't need the most expensive ones in the world. You just need compliance with them taking them, which I think that you should really consider too. Compliance. The herbs only work if you take it. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, absolutely. Sorry, get off on these. I've got these little soapbox for our profession that just drive me insane. And you know why most of them drive me insane? It's because, doing this so long, I made all these mistakes. I was that guy. I was that clinic where I was just struggling until I started to figure these things out. I always treated well, but I want us all to succeed.
Yeah, I hear you. All my best rants are things that I had to reverse engineer when something didn't feel good inside. I was like, "Oh, this is bad. What happened?" Take it all
Yeah.
apart. And I think a lot of times we're talking to ourselves 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just what I
Yeah.
wish I knew, you know?
Well, and again, with that on that, I don't think that I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've learned a lot of lessons. Some of them more hard than others.
So I have a couple questions for you from, I put a little post out a while back and just asked some of our colleagues what they would like to hear. One of these, this might be kind of quick, but somebody asked, what books or source did you use to help break down the steps in making evil bone water?
um, so actually, that's a little bit difficult because again, I think behind every overnight success is either a lot of money or a lot of time and experience. And in my case, it definitely wasn't a lot of money. um, when I started this, I was doing good with my clinic. You know what I mean? I probably made a salary of $90,000 a year on a part-time, basis. I had no complaints or anything like that, but I definitely didn't have a lot of money to throw at something. A lot of times, if you throw a lot of money at something, it takes care of a lot. But what I did have is I had 25 years of experience with herbal medicine and with really insightful herbal medicine, not just doing the same things over and over again. But like you were saying, like with your system, going through and every single time looking at things. Even today, when I go to prescribe somebody something, I choose three. So I've got this huge pharmacy. I choose three. I pick these three out and I differentiate between the three. These days, it's almost always my first choice, but I've got these two other choices that will work pretty well. They just might not work as well. And so going through that mental thing makes it good. Um, as far as it goes with helping with this particular project, I think it was more just being a little bit pissed off at Solstice. and deciding I like to do things. If I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. It's as simple as that. I don't think that there's, if I can't do it right, why am I even going to do it? I mean, one of the things that happens as you get more education experience and you're better at what you do, is the things that you turn down are more important than the things, the opportunities that you take. They really, really are. There's so many things that you can do. There's so many opportunities that you might have available to you, but the things that you choose, they should be important to you, and you should be able to put your all into them. So I was like, with this, I want to put my all into it. Having seen the provenance of it and the history of Shunga Shui, and how the dudes were like all sort of military and off the edge a little bit, and how it was like absconded by the Chinese army, excuse me, absconded by the Chinese during the Cultural Revolution in exchange for the guy's freedom because he was like this super cool dude. I'm like, I got to do them right. And that's part of it. I looked at it and I'm like, man, I would love to do this family right by making this the way that they want it to be made. Because, I thought about it. If the founder or those original family members looked at it today, would they like be cool with it? I'm like, I'm not really sure that they would. So all of those things that you're talking about, Tooth of the Tiger's Paw with Tom and all those other books, they're fantastic. But passion trumps all that. It really does. If you've got passion for something and you really feel a need for it, which, if I can go off on a tangent for one little second, for people that are developing products, I don't think it's bad to develop multiple products at one time. But what I think you should do in that is you should use that time, if you're doing more than one, to pick your pony. If you find one, you're like, man, this is good. This is good. We can make a million good things, right? But if you're like, man, this one's hitting with all these people. This one's doing something that doesn't. If you find one, pick your pony, run with that. Use it for all your pet projects to have fun with and whatnot. And it depends on how your mind works. Like I'm a one trick pony because I know that if I diffuse myself, I'll want to make all these other things perfect, and I won't. I can't. So I know that I can make one thing perfect. That's it. So I have to. Those things that I talk about turning down, those are the most important things that I do. I turn them down. So
Yeah,
that's
that's a trap we get into because our profession is very heavily DIY. Oh, I can reverse engineer it. Oh, I can make it myself. That's a strength at a certain point of development. It's also a weakness at a certain point of development. I get the same things sometimes with some of the practitioners that I work with, and we have these big conversations about, oh, I want to have a business model where I'm charging high ticket annual memberships, and I also want to be able to help everybody in the world at a very low ticket sliding scale kind of thing. And I don't want to be the guy that says, like, you have to pick one, it's one or the other. But what I will say is, when you have a couple different things that are competing for your attention, it's really kind of interesting if we think beyond our own selves. And if we say, you know what, there's somebody else who's already really good at doing this, or who wants to do this, or whatever, maybe I could focus on the other one. And then they can handle that, and we'll feed each other, we'll refer, we'll share,
yeah.
the whole thing grows together. And so if you're going to pick, if you're going to do one liniment, and you're like, man, I really want to do a Zhengu Shui old style, right? I want to go do it artisanally and all that. And you start doing that, you don't have to make every single thing, right? You don't have to revamp Posemon or whatever, all these things, because you're making noise about this. You're inspiring people. There's going to be somebody who wants to make something else, somebody who wants to make something else. It doesn't always have to be like us doing it. So, you're kind of breaking through and going, okay, here's how you deal with the FDA. Here's how you deal with the GMP stuff. That's awesome, to be kind of a human shield for everybody. I always think of Terminator 2, like Schwarzenegger, hugging the kid and just, it's just his back's exploding. Somebody's got to take that role, right? It's always like that. But then you can bring people through, and now it's like these projects get done, but they don't have to be yours. And I think that that's liberating a lot of times with practitioners, because it's like, we want to do, I use the business model, but there's tons of different stuff like this where it's like, oh, I also want to have things that people can, that's totally free or that's very low cost and anybody can do it. And it's like, yeah, those can exist. Maybe you don't have to be the one making them, and it's kind of like, that's one of the ways to help ourselves focus and still realize everything will get done. And it's not
I
quite
think
delegation, but it's more like a Bigger vision, yeah.
So I have, I don't know if some people have seen them, some people are not, but I've got four emojis that I use for love evil bone water. There's a love, there's a skull and crossbone, there is a big meaty bone that has a lot of meat on it, and then there's a water symbol, right? And the meaty bone is the most important one. There is so much meat on this bone. We have everybody going against us and trying to take our modalities and trying to abscond our, because we just don't have the leadership. We have leadership that's fighting a little bit of this and that, instead of what our leadership should be doing nationally is making us stronger. Screw all that other stuff. Improve our scope. Give us 50 state portability, like make us where we're powerhouses in our own right, where we can do PT, we can do adjustments, we can do whatever. If we stop worrying about all this little stuff, which we do not have the resources to fight or the skills to fight, if we started focusing on getting good, there is so much meat on the bone, it's not even funny. So let's say, for instance, that somebody sets up, you know, blocks away from me and is doing a community acupuncture thing, or they're doing something that's different than what I do, I would actually freaking love it. I would send them people all day because I don't have time to do that. I have formerly focused on what I do, and you're exactly right, Jeremy. It's like um, that competition thing is super prevalent in chiropractors and super prevalent in physical therapists, which is why one of the many reasons I hated being a physical therapist. One of the many reasons why I only deal with a couple of different chiropractors, because it's I don't want to call it toxic. It just doesn't serve anything. If I'm going to put my energy towards something, it's going to be to lengthen my own line and make my own line better, or make my people's line better, instead of like trying to do something to limit other people. Who cares? I mean, we're getting into a time in medicine in particular where there are so few of us that are here actually working in the trenches and whatnot, that helping, you're exactly right, doing what you do well. And here the other side of doing what you do well is like, it's fun. You don't have to treat that whiny patient that does something completely that you don't want to, unless that's your thing. If that type of whiny patient with that, it's no fun when you're doing stuff that you don't like to do. But also with like topicals and products, we are in such an infancy. We can help each other grow to like these huge powerhouses. I mean, what I would really love to see is within 10 years, 5 to 10 years, I would love to see us have a good like 20 powerhouse products that are going out there like I am and trying to affect not the TCM market as much, but trying to affect the whole market. Like the more that we get people going, oh, with all the stuff that's going on in the world, right? Where they are not even looking that it's Chinese medicine. They're just looking that it's something impactful. And then when they look back at it, they're like, oh crap. Well, maybe this freaking person down the street that does Chinese medicine is only half as crazy as I thought they were. I would take that. I would take half as crazy. You know what I mean? But it does. It opens doors. It lowers that barrier that you're talking about, that barrier of belief. Yeah. But anyway, we are so there, and I would love to see if we could all start to come together on pushing things forward instead of making things fighting this and that and the other.
All right, next question. I'm going to shoot through these as we're kind of on our tail end here.
All right,
I don't
let's do
want to
it.
keep you all day. I know your lady got home. I'm sure you got things to do. This one's quick. Could this help with pain that comes from nerves like carpal tunnel and ulnar nerve entrapment while going through PT?
So yeah, what we've really seen is interesting. Remember that at the heart of it, Sheng Shui, original Sheng Shui, ours, Evil Bone Water, Sheng Shui, um, is meant to very deeply penetrate, heal ligament, tendon, bone, etc. So we've even seen cases of like diabetic neuropathy where all of a sudden it starts to improve, because what it's doing is it's giving the nerves what they need without the immune system having to do it. I think that's how that happens. So as far as that goes, I really think yes, but also unless you remove the mechanical blockage or remove what's going on. So let's say, for instance, you've got carpal tunnel syndrome, you've got some kind of numbness that's going into the arm. I am going to not only work and decompress the spine, I'm going to make sure that the first 2 or 3 ribs are good. I'm going to chase the whole problem. And I would highly encourage that. If you think it's involved, treat it. That's one of our biggest reasons that we get such good clinical results. If I think it's involved, I treat it. And here's the thing: if it's something weird, the very worst thing that happens is we treat them 3, 4, 5 times and it's gone and we don't really know what it was. But do you really care? I mean, if it's gone and you know what to do if it happens again, do you really care if you knew what it was? We're so hung up on this day and age on diagnosis that we don't just think treat, which is another reason why I hated being a physical therapist, because you get a prescription that said treat the infraspinatus and you're like, well, dude, it's not the infraspinatus. It's like this whole thing. So will it help and assist with that? Absolutely, as an adjunct.
Okay. What advice do you have for acupuncturists who are trying to grow their clinic?
Mm.
They're starting to get some patients. They're kind of at that awkward point where they're starting to get busy. Maybe they're about to get a waiting list.
So people people don't like to be sold anymore. They don't. Provide value, become a part of your community. So, there used to be this whole thing. I grew, my businesses grew up in the 90s when we did the Wayne Dwyers, we did all the big names and stuff, and you did all the businessy stuff, which the world was still sort of accustomed to that and wanted that. People don't want to be sold anymore. So, the best things that you'll ever do, and this may be a stretch for you, because believe it or not, I used to have, and I might still have a little bit of it, like horrible social anxiety. I was not the person that would go out and public speak or this and that. I don't know where that changed, but still, social anxiety, etc. But the local class that you take, when you go to a business that's a small business, say, oh, hi, I'm so and so. I have this business over here, or I work in this over here. People actually really, really like that stuff. And it's going to take a stretch for you to tell them a little brief story that you normally wouldn't just share with people. But especially the smaller the community, the more that works. The more that I've even gone to a pawn shop one time just to look around and been like, oh, yeah, I'm the guy that's over here in the village, the witch doctor, blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing you know, somebody in that network comes back to me. So I would say becoming known. Becoming known is infamous or whatever is not a bad thing. Now you can go the other direction where you just use the numbers, because when we get down to marketing is about numbers. So let's say, for instance, that you want to use Instagram, you want to use Facebook, you want to use Google, you want to get your likes, and you want to get your whatever. There are things to do that. That's not my bag, but it does work. You just have to do numbers. I mean, remember, the pet rock was one of the first things that made $1 million, and it was literally a rock in a box. That's all that it was. But
Yeah.
the marketing was so good for this rock in a box that everybody thought they needed it. So it depends on what kind of clinic that you want to have. What I would say is the best, so to speak.
Tips on hiring, when to hire,
Oh,
and
Jesus.
or you can give the cliff notes here if that's a big one.
So I've always wanted to help people along the way. I've always wanted to help make them good physicians. I've always chose younger people and new people new to the industry. I'm not sure that I would do that anymore. I hate to say it, but I think in the past 5 to 10 years, schools have dropped the ball just a little bit on showing what an actual practice is. I want people, instead of me telling you how I would hire or tip on hiring, what I would tell you is this: if you're looking for a hire, make sure that they're particularly comfortable with working with at least 30 to 50 patients a week. Because the economics of it are this: 20 patients or less, the clinic makes no money. It's as simple as that. If I hire an associate, unless I have 4 of them at 20 patients a week, because of all the expenses, because of all the things that are unseen with owning a business, you literally make no money until the person hits 20. And what I've seen with a lot of the newer associates is they get burned out at 20. I go in every other week for 3 days in St. Simon's. I see 50 people. Now, my age and my capacity, is that pushing it a little bit? Maybe a little bit. But I've seen up to 27, 28, 29 a day. Not that I would want to do that for full Chinese medicine, for hands-on, for herbs, for the whole bit. So what you have to do is you have to really look at that and make sure that you're getting talent that's in, or you're getting a worker that's in. Because if I have a real worker that's in, I can make them talented, but I can't take somebody talented and make them a worker. It's just not going to happen. So I hope that's not, it's kind of negative, but it's been my experience over 3, 4 associates so far. So all of you guys that are getting out of school, you can live a lifestyle that's really, decent, like a lifestyle business on part-time Chinese medicine. But if you want to make doctor money, you 100% can, but you got to do doctor work. And that's that's kind of with everything though. Like if you want to make good money, it's almost always work. You don't see it, but it's work. It's
Yep.
work.
Yeah.
But
Nobody
you love
just
you love what you're doing. So is it really work? I don't know.
yeah nobody just shows up and throws cash at you.
No, no, they don't.
Turns
They
out.
don't. I actually had. I'll just put this to you. I had this person where we put so much training to them, would do anything they wanted to, like we were going to give them more training and whatnot, and we were having a meeting about, because she was reaching 20 patients like a week or whatever, and she was starting to get a little frazzled on the 20 patients a week. And she looked at me after I was giving her whatever she wanted as far as training and equipment and whatever else goes, and she looked at me and she said, "So, are you telling me that the only way I'm going to make more money is if I see more patients?" I was just like, your percentage is almost exactly the same as mine. How? Yes,
Yeah.
that's how money works. You see more paid people, you make more money. And so I think that the schools really need to start instilling this. They need to start saying, look, you can do great and have a nice little lifestyle and stuff like that as, as a Chinese medicine physician. But unless you're willing to work, you're not going to make doctor money. You're not going to drive the car you want. You're not going to live in the house that you want. But you perfectly can. It's You're very capable. It's that time.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good distinction there about talent and work ethic. So I have one final question that I've been asking everybody on this series. We'll get to that in just a sec. Before we do, I need to get some evil bone water. That was the other question I had. So we may as well do right now, like, how do people find you, website, all that kind of stuff?
So basically, we never intended this, but evilbonewater.com comes up first on all the search engines just because of all you guys. You guys have SEO'd it for us. We don't have to do anything. It comes up first. And just to let you know, after the first of the year, we're actually going to change this. Where for the first couple years that we had it, it was basically set up for practitioners because wholesale accounts is what we were trying to do. We're going to set it up where it's for the public so that when they see it, since you've already SEO'd for us, we've got a great platform where when people see it, they really, really are getting a lot of Evil Bone Water information that leads them all to you. That's what we want to do. When we say brand promotion, it's not for me. We'll never sell singles. We're promoting you guys, right? So if you want a wholesale account, there is a password. I will tell you that the password is the same for everybody because I'm kind of like weird that way. Where, and we're also at the point where if you break the rules and whatnot, we'll just cut you off, which sounds bad, but it's a family type thing. So for acupuncture physicians, you can go and you can sign up for an account on evilbonewater.com, or you can just private message me. And if it's very obvious that you're an acupuncture physician or do acupuncture in your clinic, we'll go ahead and give you the password to it. The password's also readily available in any forums if you search them that are for just acupuncture physicians. So, and we keep the unit cost for you guys super, super low, and we're always going to do that. We will never have any, I can't say we'll never have any cost increases, but we'll never have any of any significance. We have always wanted to make our money on volume and have you guys make the bulk of the income from it. So that's why you have to do all the work and we don't produce a bunch of stuff.
Very cool. All right. So the last question: what advice would you give somebody who's either just graduated, new in the field, something like that?
So there are exceptions to this, but I would really, you know, I would saddle my horse on a really, really good clinic that was willing to come in and teach you, not really caring how much that you make. But I would get with a good, successful clinic. I would offer them, look, I will give you 2 years of my life or whatever it is if you'll teach me everything that you know, and just settle on making whatever you make. They're not really going to do you wrong, but it's not going to be the money that you think that you're going to make by what the schools have kind of told you you're going to make. But what'll happen is you'll get with that company, you'll learn the ins and the outs, and you'll learn if you actually want to be a business owner or don't. But you'll also learn all of the things that it would take to be a business owner if you really pay attention and you really give it your all. And give it your all. Don't just be there whenever you're scheduled. Be there. Experience what it is to be a doctor of Oriental medicine full time for 2 years, and then just figure it out. Because a lot of people don't realize, like, after all of these years, which may happen sooner or later, like the percentage that I work on at my own clinic, if I were to walk in and do that now, that percentage is fantastic to me because you don't have to deal with all the other stuff. And some people just aren't meant for that. You know what I mean? And it's nice to think that we can do everything, but we really can't. So if you immerse yourself in somebody's busy clinic for a couple of years, you'll be able to realize, if you really, really think about it honestly, do I want to be an employee or do I want to be an owner? Because being an owner, and there's difference between, let me tell you what, there's the difference between owning a business and working for yourself. There's a huge difference. Owning a business is when all the paperwork's done, all the legalities are done, all the everything's taken care of, and that the business can make money when you're not there. That's owning a business. When you don't have all that stuff in place, you're just working for yourself. And so if I could say from the beginning, say for instance, you're one of the few that does really want to be have your own business and whatnot, don't skimp. Set it all right from the beginning. Get yourself an LLC, get yourself an accountant, do all the paperwork that's necessary, because I didn't for many years and it just screwed me. I didn't realize, like, if you're doing things right, you don't even have to like have any tax liability until you reach like $250,000 a year, especially if you like your business and you're investing back into it. I think at 250,000 to 225, 250 a year for many, many years, my actual taxes I had to pay on that business, $400 or $500 a year or something like that. So it's kind of like false economy. You think, oh, I'm going to save all this money by getting away from the IRS, and then you go to buy a building 20 years later, and you're like, oh crap, I'm going to have to pay this anyway. I'm going to have to figure this. Not that I know anybody like that. I'm going to have to figure out this anyway. So look to the future. Highly recommend working for somebody else for a few years to get it, and just giving it your all. Don't give it like halfway, and just see what's for you.
Very cool. Well, it's been wild watching your whole bone water journey. Very inspiring. I love when somebody focuses on something and then just goes hard on quality. So it's been very, very cool, and I'm excited for you. This next step is going to be awesome. Thanks
It's
for.
going to be good. I'm excited to. I'm excited to. Like I said, I just focus on helping as many people as possible, and that's where the juice is.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. We'll talk soon.
All right, buddy.